Yeah, today is not really my day. There's Magda, great. Okay, then we can start. And welcome to everyone to this seminar on rule of law and democracy in Poland. We have, as you can see, 3 wonderful speakers from Poland. And we are really happy that all of you took the time to join the seminar and webinar today. It's actually part of a webinar series that we are organizing because, as you know, at the moment, the European Parliament is not working as usual. Still, I am in the European Parliament right now because I didn't have internet in my at home anymore. So now I'm here and I'm very happy that we have listeners probably from all over Europe who are going to join the debate today. It's a very important and very timely debate that we are having because, as you know, just yesterday the European Commission has announced that they are going to have another infringement procedure against Poland. I think we will come back to that very shortly. My name is Terry Reintke. I'm a member of the European Parliament, and to let you know why I'm working on this topic, I'm the shadow rapporteur for the Article 7 procedure that has been launched against Poland for the Greens in the European Parliament, and that is why I am following the situation in Poland already for a little bit of time. Yeah, and I'm very happy that we could organize this seminar. It's a little bit maybe also following up on debates that we have already had and the wish to continue exactly the engagement with civil society, but obviously also political, academic and other representatives from Poland here in the European Parliament, because this situation is not new. The situation has already been very worrying for a period of time with an undermining of the peace government of rule of law, especially the independence of the judiciary, but also fundamental rights, especially with regards to women's and LGBTI rights. And this is why also today in the seminar we want to cover all of these aspects and obviously then answer all the questions that will come up from the side of the audience. And before we go into the list of speakers and what wonderful people we could win to give inputs today, I just wanted to very briefly explain the system. We had some problems in the very beginning, but usually it works really well. You can see yourself in the list. And if you want to later on ask a question or make a very short comment, you can raise your hand, and then I'm going to see that you would like to take the floor, and then I can give you the floor to ask a question. You can also ask questions in the chat that you can see, so just write them down and then we will collect them. And after the inputs, there is going to be a question round. Probably we will only have time for 1 question round. So if you have a question, then ask it either in the chat or raise your hand. And just to let you know that this webinar is going to be recorded because we want to share it also for people who don't have time to join tonight. So obviously for data protection reasons, if you don't want your name to be shared or anything, you can just type the question and then we are going to ask the speakers. Okay, without further ado, then I would like to welcome again our wonderful speakers. Thanks for taking the time. I hope where you are, it's as sunny as here in Brussels. The sun suddenly came out. And we are going to go a little bit into different issues regarding the situation in Poland. And as I said, an Article 7 procedure has been launched, and there was a very specific focus on the situation of the judiciary. And that is why I'm very happy that we have Johanna Hedna-Rowitz-Sikora. I hope I was not too bad. Okay. And she is a board member of the Polish association Iustitia. And for all of you who don't know what that is, it is, and I checked on the website, an independent, apolitical and self-governing association of Polish judges. So she's going to specifically give insight on the situation of the independence of the judiciary, and also for the background, maybe the infringement procedure that was launched yesterday was also specifically about the disciplinary measures that have been taken against Polish judges in the past weeks and months now already. So I'm sure that she will also give us a little bit of insight on what maybe the association and you expect also from the Commission and from the European side to do more than just this infringement procedure. Then, before I give you the floor, we have Magda Gałkiewicz also there. My Polish is still in process, and she is one of the wonderful girls who started a feminist initiative, especially against the backdrop of the attack on women's rights in Poland. As you can remember, there have been several attacks on the access to sexual and reproductive rights under the current government. There were hundreds and thousands of women organizing, taking into the street, mobilizing, and she was one of the main organizers from Łódź. And we will discuss with her specifically the situation, obviously, of women's rights, but hopefully also of LGBTI rights. And then last but not least, jumping in a little bit, if I understand correctly, for Ula Zielinska, the Green Parliament member in Poland, Maciej Józefowicz, and he is hello, and he is the international secretary of the Polish Greens, and as such also very closely following the developments in Poland. But surely he will also be able to give us insight about what the European side should do, what is asked in Poland from the European level, what further steps should be taken, and what kind of solidarity we can also show from other parts of Europe. So these are, as you can see, very prominent and very interesting speakers who will show the different facets of the situation in Poland. And now I have already spoken a lot. Just before you start, Joanna, if you have specific questions, also if you have technical issues, just write it into the chat and we will try to get back to you to help you with technical stuff, but obviously also if you have questions on the substance. And with that, if I can ask the others to mute their microphones while they are not speaking, because that helps the audio quality. And then I give the floor to Joanna.
Okay. First of all, I would like to thank you, Terry, for your invitation. I'm really honored and I really admire what you are doing for us, for Poland. I observe you, your fan page on Facebook, and I'm really impressed of your determination, and thank you for that, really, because you are a really great friend of Poland. Thank you. And a friend of the rule of law, of course. So my name is Joanna Sikora. I am a judge from Poland. I work for the first instance of district court, a local district court, and I'm also the member of the National Board of Polish Judges Association, Iustitia. Well, it's really hard to gather all the news from the past 3 months during 10 minutes, but I will really try to do it. And I think we shall start from the verdict of the European Court of Justice from the 19th November of 2019. That was the decision which gave us hope that maybe the destruction of Polish judiciary and violation of the basic human rights in Poland in this judicial aspect will stop. The problem is that the Polish Supreme Court tried to adopt this verdict, this decision to the Polish judicial order. For example, by giving a resolution of the formation of the combined civil chamber, criminal chamber, and labor law chamber of the Supreme Court. But every move of the Polish Supreme Court is being blocked by executive powers, and also by legislative powers, and also by judges who are so-called neo-judges, and they are already working in the Supreme Court. Even if the Supreme Court tries to do something and then try to block the valid law, then there is always a reaction of one of the neo-judges from Supreme Court, who, for instance, ask questions to Polish Tribunal of Constitutional Tribunal, so-called Constitutional Tribunal, which is deprived of its independence and is pretty much involved into politics, unfortunately. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is that, as I said before, that the executive and legislative powers are also trying to block every move of Polish judges and Polish judiciary. And so on 14th of February this year, the muzzle bill was started to work, came into force. The muzzle bill is something which is really, really interesting, because that is legislation which deprives judges of their independence, as under a threat of expulsion from the office. They are prohibited from applying the judgments of the Court of Justice of European Union. And this bill also constitutes a breach of Poland's commitments to the European Union by disregarding the doctrine of primacy of European Union law over national law arising from the Treaty of the European Union and Polish Constitution. The legislation introduces also a disciplinary liability of judges for rendering judgments that are contrary to the expectations of the political power. Moreover, the legislation violates Polish constitution by prohibiting judges from exercising decentralized control over compliance of secondary legislation with the constitution. It also curtails the right to free speech and the right of privacy of judges, and introduces a mechanism of invigilation obliging judges to disclose membership in associations and functions that perform in foundations. It's the interesting thing is that we had the time till 14th of March to give all the information about associations that we belong to as judges, about our membership. And majority of judges did not obey this this rule. We didn't we didn't confess, we didn't disclose membership in associations, and it's a kind of a protest of our group of judges against the rule, which breaches the fundamental rights. This judge is also a human being as everyone else, and we should have right to privacy and to gathering and to associate freely with, and we don't have to confess it publicly. The problem also was that this information about membership in associations and functions in foundations was to be published publicly, so everyone could see it in internet. So as about this this muzzle bill, I also have to say that this bill has its freezing effect. Judges are intimated by this bill. They really think twice before starting asking questions. For instance, to apply preliminary rulings and ask preliminary questions. They also intimidated in this public activities. They are afraid, pretty much afraid of giving public speeches and giving opinions about the rule of law in public, because they absolutely know that it might cause them a disciplinary procedure that can be launched against them. So this freezing effect, I think, affected also even judges in the Supreme Court. They decided not to convene a General Assembly of judges of the Supreme Court to choose the candidates for the first president of the Supreme Court. They just didn't want to fight, in my opinion, and it also might be the effect of this muzzle bill regulations. Interesting thing is that the muzzle bill changed the rules of appointment of the first president of the Supreme Court. As you probably know, the first president of the Supreme Court stopped her cadence today. Today is the last day of presiding of Professor Gazdov on the seat of the first president of the Supreme Court. And today, we should know the name of the successor of Professor Gazdov, and the successor should be chosen by the General Assembly of judges of the Supreme Court. The General Assembly was obliged, due to the muzzle bill, to appoint 5 candidates and for this seat. And the president was free to choose the first president among them, among those 5 candidates. It can be not necessarily the one who achieved the biggest support of the Supreme Court judges. It could be the one who achieved the lowest support, but that was under discretion of the president who to choose. Judges of Disciplinary Chamber and of the Chamber of Extraordinary Control and Public Matters were supposed to take part in the process of choosing the first president. And the funny thing is that the interesting thing is that even the decisions of the European Court of Justice did not change it. In fact, you probably know that Court of Justice of European Union gave the verdict of the 8th of April with interim measures and suspended the disciplinary chamber itself. But unfortunately, it suspended the disciplinary chamber only in this aspect of working on cases. But still, the judges of disciplinary chamber are the judges, so they can take part in the process of choosing the first president of the Supreme Court. And why is the first president of the Supreme Court so important? Because he's the one to decide about the validity of the elections in Poland, of the presidential elections in Poland. I also would like to say that today there was a decision announced that the president of Poland, in responding the fact that the General Assembly did not choose the 5 candidates for the first president of the Supreme Court, decided to appoint a neo-judge, we call them pseudo-judges, the neo-judge of the Supreme Court, Justice Kamil Zaradkiewicz, to the position of the temporary president of the Polish Supreme Court for the period of elections of the first president of the Supreme Court. And this is probably, believe me, the most politicized possible candidate. Unfortunately, totally depends on Minister of Justice, Zbigniew Ziobro. And that is an appointment as disgusting as possible, unfortunately. So it also shows the level of admiration of the way of thinking of the first of the Supreme Court by legislative and executive powers. So that's the one aspect. I also would like to really shortly speak about the other aspect of this condition of Polish judiciary. As you probably know, we have a lot of new disciplinary proceedings against judges, and these proceedings are taken against those who criticize the reforms of the judiciary and were brave enough to speak publicly and to apply verdicts of Court of Justice of European Union. One of the judges who is a victim of such repressions of disciplinary proceedings is Justice Paweł Juszczyszyn, and the other one is Justice Igor Tuleya. They are all, both of them are abused of abusing of powers by applying judgments of European of the Court of Justice of European Union, and both of them are being harmly repressed. Paweł Juszczyszyn was suspended as a judge, and they cut his salary. So it's quite, and it's only an interim measure. So this interim measure will continue until the final verdict in his case. So that's a very shortcut of the situation in Poland. I think that I can say something further if you have any other questions.
I think we will come to the questions later. People can already write things into the chat. I think it has become really clear, and thanks, Joanna, for outlining that, that there is a grab towards having more control, political control over the judiciary in Poland, and everybody, so especially the judges who kind of resist this power grab by the Polish government, are, well, at least threatened to be sanctioned, and that is deeply problematic. Maybe just really shortly before we move on to the other speakers, we have touched a little bit upon the situation, what the European Commission can do. You have referred back to an ECJ ruling. Maybe in a couple of sentences, what would you want to see from the European Commission aside of this infringement procedure that is going to be launched right now? And if I may add, you have touched upon the situation with the presidential elections on the 10th of May. Just for everybody who might not know, the current government is going to go ahead with the presidential elections, even under these really difficult situations. And now it will be a full postal vote that is going to create the ballot. But there is no real campaigning going on. So aside the running president right now, it is really hard for people to do any political campaigning. And the OSCE has already said that this is not a fair and free campaign. So it cannot be a fair and free election on the on the 10th of May. Maybe you could also briefly say what you think should happen with regards to that. But I will also bring back this question to Maciej later.
Mm-hmm. So first of all, I hope that Court of Justice of European Union will proceed in quite a short time the Polish cases. The one about disciplinary proceedings and the system of disciplinary proceedings in Poland. It's really, really important to prevent Polish judiciary from this enormous fear of being expelled from the office. Believe me, that's the problem of my colleagues. Most of my colleagues are being intimidated by this threat of expulsion from the office, which is not good for normal, ordinary citizens, because the judge cannot be afraid to apply conventions, European conventions, to apply judgments of European Court of Justice in several cases. That is, we need independency to protect people and to assure that the rights are really being on the first place for all the judges in Poland. So what I expect is, yes, that the Court of Justice of European Union will proceed really in a really fast way. And the other thing is that I expect, and I think it's really needed, that the European Commission will react really categorically, I mean, really harmly, when they see that the interim measures are not followed by Polish executive and legislative powers. So I really expect the reaction which will be adequate to the situation. Maybe it will mean the financial penalties for Poland, I don't know. But if they are needed, if that is the only way to make Polish government realize that judgments are something which should be followed, then yes, that's what we are expecting, in fact.
Thanks a lot for this insight and shining a light on the very dire situation of the independence of the judiciary in Poland, and especially the situation of Polish judges. And I can only say that here in the European Parliament, I mean, you were also there. We already had testimonies of judges, a very difficult situation that we are in, and that we want to follow up on this. And one of the things that we are suggesting is to have a resolution in the European Parliament, even during this crisis. And because obviously we have the Article 7 procedure, we have a report regarding the Article 7 procedure, but I think it's also important to continuously raise awareness around the situation and the difficulties that especially judges in Poland are facing right now. So thanks a lot. And now I would like to move a little bit to a different side, I would say, of well, maybe it's two sides of the same coin, and move to Magda, who I have already said in the beginning is very active on women's rights and feminist issues, and the two bills that have recently been very much debated here were the bills that were put to the Polish Parliament 2 weeks ago. One was again on restricting the access to the already very restrictive abortion law in Poland, and the second one was about access to information about sexual and reproductive rights and sex education. Maybe you could start there, but then also highlight in which ways fundamental rights are under threat right now, and also there what we should do, what we could do in order to support the activists and the people in Poland standing up to that.
Okay, thank you very much, Terry. First of all, I would like to also thank you for this invitation and for your constant support from the very beginning that we have from your side, and for speaking on behalf of Polish women in the European Parliament. This is very important for us, so thank you very much for that. And well, I will start that generally in Poland, women, minorities, especially LGBT society, we find ourselves under a constant attack, especially right now during the coronavirus. Well, right now we are facing especially a rise of the domestic violence. Underfunded NGOs during the lockdown have difficulty to help. We are facing strong attack of conservatives on women's rights. It's what you were saying, such as strengthening the anti-abortion bill and anti-sex education bill proposal. So I will talk about that in a moment. Also, we are facing closure of childcares and wave of unemployment. I think that is happening all over Europe. And here women are more vulnerable because they have to tackle both work and childcare. And the recent peak of the attacks on women's rights, on LGBT rights, took place, as you said, 2 weeks ago. Polish Parliament has scheduling the debate. I would say debate in the quotation mark, because right now there is no debate in the Polish Parliament. It's a silent Parliament. Maybe Maciej will say more about that. Anyway, the Polish Parliament has scheduling this debate of several very dangerous bills during this COVID pandemic in the situation of the complete lockdown of the citizens, and 2 of those bills were against women's rights and against LGBT rights, and both of them were proposed as citizen initiatives, but in fact were prepared by a religious fundamentalist organization cooperating with Ordo Iuris. I don't know if you have heard of that. If you are from Poland, for sure. If not, this is one of the organizations that is a part of the Agenda for Europe. So very, very dangerous fundamentalist organization. And the first bill proposed by Kaja Godek would strengthen the anti-abortion law. If you are not from Poland, maybe I will give the visibility. Right now, the abortion in Poland is illegal, except just 3 cases. When the women's life is or health is in danger, it's the first one. When the pregnancy is a result of the criminal act, and finally, in a case of serious and irreversible fetal abnormality. And the proposed bill would remove the 3rd condition, is the serious fetal abnormality, which is a case of 97% of abortion in Poland. So in practice, this change of the law it's just make the abortion illegal completely in our country. And the second bill, it's a bill proposed by anti-LGBT organization. Proposed by anti-LGBT organization would make teaching or promoting sexual education to people under 18 a crime with a sentence up to 3 years in prison. And both of these this bill proposal has been scheduling on Wednesday, 2 days after Easter. And to give you more background of what our government has been done before this let's say debate, is that on Friday, just before Easter, the law was changed silently, as is happening very often recently in Poland, sadly, and the right for gathering has been completely forbidden. I would say even 2 persons couldn't be together on the street. So we were in the really difficult situation on that moment. And because this was a situation of the complete lockdown, and the standard street protest as we made before, and as that was very numerous, as you know, so far, were not possible. So we had to look for other form of protests. within or on the border, you know, on this restrictive law, which was introduced in Poland. Actually, maybe it's worth to pronounce that without any constitutional grounds. Sorry. Yeah. So the situation was difficult, but you know, women are very inventive and creative. So there was a whole bunch of different online actions and protests all over the Poland. I don't know if you, maybe I would like to tell you about some of them, because it's quite interesting what women invented to defend our rights. So on Saturday before Easter, one of us, Marta Lempart, maybe you have heard of her. It's also a really big fighter for women's rights in Poland. Has organized the first ever lockdown virtual protest in social media. This protest lasted all day long from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., where activists, politicians, artists, film directors, actresses has been talked about what was happening, why blocking these inhuman ideas was so important, and they told also very often their personal stories. And the live stream from that online protest has been shared by thousands of people all over the social media. So it was really a good initiative. But there was also a lot of initiatives on the streets, even if it was forbidden. For instance, from Friday to Wednesday, thousands of activists was all over the Poland stood with posters and banners in line in so-called queuing protests in front of the shops and supermarkets. And on the day of this so-called debate in the parliament, there was a big, large card protest in Warsaw. And the city center has been blocked totally, and all the cars has been marked by the posters, the banners, hashtags and slogans. We have protested also by forming a line in front of the Polish parliament building, and in Łódź, in my city, with the Gas for Gas, but also other organizations, we have organized distributing the protective masks. But we have loudspeakers and sound system, and our stand has been, you know, covered by the posters and the banners. And for an hour and a half during the action, it was really loud. We're talking about what is happening in the parliament right now, and how the Polish government was breaking the law. So really a lot of ideas, also balconies and windows of thousands of homes and apartments were full of umbrellas, posters, banners, and people even, you know, changing names of their home Wi-Fi to Black Protest or Women's Strike to show their support for our fight. So even though that the protest was not so massive as before, as we did in 2016 during the women's strike and the Black Monday, so media were really interested and showed different kinds of protests, spreading the information to the masses and showing our resistance. But the sad thing is that despite the fact that the protests were actually legal, I would say, under the restrictions that we have at that time, Polish police was very often very aggressive against the activists and put some, you know, some penalties on us. So it was really difficult to know to even if we were very creative, it was really difficult to discuss with this police guys. And finally, the parliament decided, unfortunately, to send the bill to Parliament Commission. What actually we're expecting, unfortunately, that it would happen, and that means that the ruling party can decide to proceed them on at any time. So we are still in this difficult situation, and we have to still be very, you know, attentive what is happening and what Polish government and the ruling party planning.
Thanks a lot, Magda. And I just wanted to highlight that obviously the Article 7 procedure that has been launched against Poland is very much focusing on the independence of the judiciary. But one of the things that we have highlighted, this was not because of the situation now with the two bills, but already in December on a resolution on the LGBTI free zones in Poland, that we think that this Article 7 procedure should actually be expanded also to fundamental rights, because as you outlined, also fundamental rights, for example, women's rights, sexual and reproductive rights, are really under threat in Poland right now, and that's why we would like to have a broader scope of the Article 7 procedure. Unfortunately, up until now, the European Commission does not necessarily agree with that, but we will see how the story continues. Thanks a lot, Magda. Also there, you can ask questions. We already have a couple of questions, but before we go into the question, I would like to finish the round by giving Maciej the floor, again, International Secretary of the Green Party in Poland. And maybe you could obviously give also your insight on the situation in general, but specifically also now with the presidential election coming up in less than 2 weeks. What is the situation? What kind of campaign can happen? Is it actually a proper campaigning situation, or would you agree with the OSCE that it's not a free and fair campaign and thus not a free and fair election that is going to happen on the 10th of May? The floor is yours.
Okay, hi everybody. First of all, I would like to say that I'm just standing in today for our friend Urszula Zielińska, who is one of the 3 Green MPs in the Polish Parliament and who is busy voting right now and making sure that the rights of employees or students are protected in the new COVID-19 relief bills that are currently voted on. And secondly, unfortunately, I must leave at 7:30 because I need to go to another meeting where I am presenting as well. So I have an unfortunate culmination today, so I need to be with you today only for 45 more minutes, and apologies for that.
Actually, we are going to finish the webinar also around that time, so you will be just in time for the next meeting.
Okay, great. So coming back to this elephant in the room that Joanna was shortly mentioning earlier, the presidential elections in Poland. So they are scheduled to take place 10 days from now on May 10. The government is very pushing to do this, but it's right now an absolute chaos and an utter madness. So basically, we are living in an extraordinary times, the COVID-19 pandemic, which struck the whole world. So we have a constitutional provisions for that. Mainly, the government should introduce so-called state of natural disaster. Now, which would grant him some extra powers, which would grant him some rights to impose restrictions on the businesses and daily life, like it already did, but also it would require any elections to be postponed to a more peaceful times when it would be safe and possible to do so. However, the Law and Justice realizes that the pandemic launched a huge economic crisis, which is coming, which is going to hit Polish economy very hard. So they are pushing to make those elections ASAP so that the crisis would not hurt the incumbent president, which was elected as a Law and Justice candidate. So because the ordinary personal voting would be too dangerous from an epidemic point of view, the government is pushing for universal postal voting. Everybody should receive a mailing package now with the ballot, and everybody now should put this ballot into the special postal box. So postal voting has been already implemented by several countries in Europe and in the world, and the government is often repeating the example of Bayern, a state in Germany, as a proof that postal voting should work. But actually, this has never been tried on a massive scale in Poland. So it is untested in Poland, and we are now trying to organize this in a matter of just a few weeks. What is better, the law, the provisions allowing to do this postal voting are officially not yet in place. They haven't been voted yet. They are now being discussed by the Polish Senate, which is controlled by the opposition. So there's a very huge chance that this bill would be rejected. But it will also return to the lower house of the Polish Parliament. Now, which has the power to overturn the Senate's veto, but it needs an absolute majority to do so. So there is one satellite party of law and justice called Porozumienie, an alliance in English, which is led by Jarosław Gowin, who has been a former Minister of Science and Higher Education in Poland, and they position themselves as a more liberal, more pro-business wing of the governing coalition. And Gowin is repeating constantly that he's against elections in May, that it's impossible to do a postal voting in such a short time. So he and his party will vote against it. So there's now a huge question coming: will he and the opposition have enough number of votes together to keep the veto and to prevent those postal elections from happening? So the Senate will vote on the bill on next Wednesday, on May 6th, and then Sejm will vote whether to keep the veto or to reject the veto, probably later the same day, or maybe at night between Wednesday or Thursday, or at Thursday, May 7th at the latest. So this gives us just a few days from a formal point of view to prepare the elections. However, the preparations has already been taking place. The ballots are being printed, and the Polish Post is already collecting voters' data, even if there is no right which obliges it to do so. So the ballots are printed, and earlier today the ballot template leaked. So you can now download the ballot, print it on your printer, and submit as many votes as you need. So this is complete madness. So another worrying thing is that in this postal voting, large number of people, Poles living abroad, homeless people, now would be excluded now from the voting, because there would be no possible way to deliver ballots to them on time. Another worrying thing is that this postal ballot would not be organized by the independent State Electoral Committee, like all the earlier votings, but it will be organized by the government, by a high-ranking law and justice politician, who is of course a very enthusiastic supporter of the president, Mr. Duda. So if the bill if the Senate veto will be overridden, and if this postal voting law will come into force. It gives the provisions to delay the voting on 1 or 2 weeks, but it still won't be enough to guarantee that the voting will be free, equal, or fair. This will be a national calamity, a national disaster. So we had 10 years ago a tragic air crash in Smolensk, where President Lech Kaczyński died, and which has strongly polarized Polish society, and also now led to the law and justice electoral win and all of this great divides we have in the society today. These elections, if they will take place, now will make this divide even bigger and even more dangerous for the social cohesion and for the Polish and for the Polish democracy as a whole. So what will happen if this voting will take place? There will be a massive amount of electoral protests, but those protests will go to the Supreme Court, which, as Joanna has said before, would be by then controlled by this so-called neo-judges, the elements of the Polish judiciary who support law and justice. And they will nonetheless declare that the voting is valid, and Mr. Duda will be re-elected president with a large advantage over the candidates of the opposition. So the thing is now what the EU and the world should do with such voting and such president who will not be a democratically elected president. So we know that the EU have been doing businesses with such people as Mr. Putin or Lukashenko, Erdogan, Xi Jinping, who are not democratically elected leaders who lead undemocratic regimes, and the EU does not specifically care about it. But this will be a serious crisis of democracy in one of the EU member states. And as you, Terry, said before, the Commissioner for Fundamental Rights, Mrs. Jourova, says this that the elections are not the part of her concern, that the right of the free and a democratic election is not the part of fundamental rights. But I think in this situation, this is the time for Greens and other progressive elements throughout the EU to pressure the European Commission for a clear declaration that those elections would be neither free nor democratic, and therefore Mr. Duda is not a democratically elected president, so he has no mandate to represent Poland internationally. Okay,
thanks a lot.
This is the clear, the short explanation of this really screwed up situation we found ourselves. So one light at the end of the tunnel, hopefully, if Mr. Gowin would have enough MPs to uphold the Senate's veto, that means that law and justice could lose the majority in the parliament, and this would have an enormous political ramification. And it would of course cause even bigger political chaos, because we are not really sure what the government do in this situation. But anyway, it would be interesting to watch.
And we will see that next week, and we will all certainly follow the developments in the Polish parliament on this. But as you have already pointed out, already the procedure that led to being in this situation really shows that the government, especially Kaczynski, is not willing to act in a spirit of compromise, but really pushes through a line, even though the Venice Commission very clearly says the that any changes to the electoral law less than 6 weeks before an election are problematic in terms of rule of law. And if I'm rightly informed, it is even the Polish constitution that also states that. So even under these regards, it is problematic.
Well, a Polish constitution does not state this directly. However, we have the ruling of the Polish Constitutional Tribunal that says that any important changes in the voting procedure must take place no later than 6 months before the election. So this new law completely changes the procedure, and now it is supposed to go into force just a few days before the elections. However, the Constitutional Tribunal is also overtaken by the majority of law and justice supporters. So if it's necessary, it may as well issue another ruling telling that it's absolutely all right to do so.
Which is even more concerning, talking about separation of powers, and we can see how far the situation has already deteriorated over the past months and years now. It's looking at the time, we already have a lot of questions, so I would like to move to have first a round of people who would like to take the floor and ask their question. Again, I would like to ask you to be short and to look at the time a little bit. If you want to raise your hand, I'm just going to explain it one more time. There is a little icon where you can see a hand raised like this. You click on it, then I see you, and then I can give you the floor. So far, I can see only one person who would like to ask the question directly, and that is Christoph. I will give you the floor now. Wait, I'm going to unmute you. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you, but I think that it's by accident on the very beginning that I push. So.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's fine.
No, it's my fault. I'm sorry for that.
Don't worry. Okay, then we only have the questions that were written in the chat. There are quite a number of questions, and I will try to divide them already a little bit amongst you. The first question to Magda, to highlight a little bit more, you mentioned the Ordo Juris, but to highlight a little bit more the situation also that the church has been playing when it comes to women's rights and LGBTI rights in Poland over the past years. Maybe you could say a couple of things about that. Then we have a question by Paul. In 2017, the EU Court of Justice had taken injunctive measures against Poland concerning the protection of biodiversity in the forest area of Białowieża. Do you think that emergency measures such as these injunctions could be effective in this case as well? I guess this is a question targeted at Joanna. I mean, injunction measures against the Polish executive, not the judiciary, precisely because its independence is so important, or is the solution only to be found on a diplomatic political level? Then I think the second question is also to Jana, but obviously the others can answer as well. By Marco, what happens to judicial cooperation in Europe when the rule of law in Poland is so deeply violated? And what are the wider impacts in member states not adhering to European law and its priority over national law? I think this is referring a little bit to the recent problem that arises from the ruling of the Constitutional Tribunal. And maybe you could also focus on that. And then there was something, there was something about also the European arrest warrant and the execution of the European arrest warrant. We already have a ruling there, so maybe Joanna could also say something about this. Then a question by Andrea. Could the acting first president of the Supreme Court appointed today become the actual first president, or is it assumed that he's just meant to manage in the interim and use the function to steer the election of the first president and any electoral disputes? I think this is also to Joanna. And then a question by Paul. The European treaties and the Charter of Fundamental Rights refer explicitly to the European Convention on Human Rights. Do you envisage any action, any discussions with this institution on this subject? maybe this is also a question that I could then say something about. And then Alicia, last question: what if the Polish government proceeds with undermining the rule of law, even if EU funding is restricted, cut, or the Court of Justice of the European Union rules that the judicial reforms are not conforming with EU law? What else can the EU do? Maybe this would also be something for Maciej to answer to. So first, I would give the floor to Joanna. There were a lot of questions to you. I hope you could take some notes. If not, then I will also remind you later maybe what you haven't covered. But the floor is yours.
Okay, I think that's what we are going to do. I will try to answer as many questions as I remember, but still there are some questions missing. So if you could remind me about the issue, that would be really nice of you, because I don't want to omit anything. So first of all, answering the question about interim measures which were applied in Białowieża case. Yes, I think we all should know that on the 8th of April there was a decision of European Court of Justice in case of disciplinary chamber in Poland, and in these interim measures, European Court of Justice decided to suspend the disciplinary chamber in its judicial competences. So in fact, the disciplinary chamber shouldn't proceed up until the end and the final judgment in the case pending in front of the Court of Justice of European Union. The problem is that what we hear as judges informally is that judges of disciplinary chamber are not interested in obeying this this rule, and that Polish government is not going to apply any legal rules to show that they are going to follow the judgment of interim measures, the decision of interim measures. So I think that the only thing which may be effective, these are the financial consequences, of course. It's obvious. It works. That's the only harm, that's the only way to make the executive and legislative powers hear and obey the rules of interim measures. So the answer is yes. I think it's not only possible, but it is also necessary to apply such measures as in Białowieża case. The other question was what will happen to judicial cooperation in Europe if the rule of law is so violated in Poland? Well, it's a hard question. It's a very good question, but also very hard. In fact, the judicial cooperation in Europe bases on the rule that we trust each other, and that all the countries in Europe follow the same rules, and they give them the minimum guarantees of obeying the fundamental rights of every citizen and everyone who has its case in a court. And what happens if one of European countries does not follow the fundamental rights and is not trustful to other partners? Well, the truth is that the other partners may refuse of cooperating with such judiciary system, and it may happen that the courts in Europe will, for instance, refuse to surrender Polish citizens. or on the base of a European arrest warrant, for instance. They may deny to follow the Polish request to surrender Polish citizen, to transfer Polish citizen from France, for instance, to Poland. It will affect Polish judiciary a lot, because of course for the accused not being surrendered to transferred to Poland, it may be quite comfortable. But in judicial cases, we always have two parties. There is an accused and a victim. And we have to think of the victims who will wait in Poland for at the end of the trial, and they won't be successful with finishing the trial because the accused is not here, and he doesn't want. It's not possible to bring him to Poland. So it will cause a lot of problems, in fact, for Polish citizens. It won't be only the problem for judiciary itself. It will also affect Polish citizens. Let's say, what about alimonies for children? If the European courts will refuse to use Polish judgments about alimonies, and they will not like to execute it, it will affect Polish children a lot. So the consequences of not obeying European law might be harmful for everyone. That's what I wanted to say. And I forgot. I don't.
There was a question because you referred to that today the term of the current president of the Supreme Court is ending, and then there was a question about wait, I'm going to find it again, that the acting first president who was appointed today could actually become the first president then, or is it just that he's meant to manage the position in interim? What is your expectation? What do you think is going to happen with regards to the first president of the Supreme Court?
Well, what will do this Mr. Justice Gałkiewicz, who is a temporary, who is acting now as first president of the Supreme Court. As I told you, Justice Gałkiewicz, this neo judge, was appointed by the president to have this function of the first president, and his task is to decide about the General Assembly of the judges of the Supreme Court. He has to convene a General Assembly of judges of the Supreme Court as soon as possible. He will do it. I'm sure he will do it. And as I told you, the judges of the Disciplinary Chamber and the judges of the Chamber of Extraordinary Control and Public Matters, or we call them neo-judges, they are allowed to take part in this process of choosing the first president. And I am sure that the first president is going to be chosen, and it will be one of the judges of these two chambers, totally dependent from the political powers in Poland. So that's what I expect will happen.
Thanks a lot. I will maybe later on also comment a little bit on how we are interacting with other European institutions, because I think that's maybe easier to say from the position of the European Parliament rather than from your position. Thanks, Joanna. Now I would maybe pass the floor to Magda, because there was a specific question about the role of the church. And maybe if I could add something to this question, the church and also maybe in general right-wing extremist Christian fundamentalist organizations, because I think it's not only something, and this again speaking from a European perspective, it's not only happening in Poland, we also see similar developments in other countries, and they're very often interlinked with each other. So maybe you could also comment on how they're using even civil society space sometimes to push for their authoritarian agenda.
Yeah, so actually the problem is well known since the beginning. Actually, there's a problem coming up from 1990s because 1993, because the law that we have right now concerning the abortion, this anti-abortion law, is the result of the abortion compromise between Polish government and the Polish Catholic Church. So really, and the position of the church in Poland is really strong, and right now is even stronger. And all this stuff that had happened concerning the abortion since 2016 has really official support of the Polish church, and there was official cooperation between the Polish Catholic Church and this Ordo Iuris organization and the religious fundamentalist organization in Poland. Even in 2000, because this anti-abortion bill proposal that you have right now has been proposed for the first time in 2017, and at that time the ruling party was really afraid to touch it after the protest in 2016, and in 1 year later, 2018, the Polish episcopate required from the Polish government to proceed. So that was the time that they started, and another big protest called Black Friday stopped them to proceed it. And today this project come back once again. Yeah, so we can see that the position is stronger and stronger. This is not only the fact of concerning the abortion, but also all the stuff concerning this anti-LGBT actions and sexual education actions. It also was a big case concerning the pedophilia that was just covered by the Polish government, so nothing happened. Still, even if there is such a big amount of proofs and cases concerning that. And concerning the language, what you told, Terry, it's that is true that this kind of organization as Ordo Iuris really try to use this human rights language. They try to take our language, and they talk about the human rights concerning the abortion, that this is a human rights to live. So this is really crazy. But the good thing is that what we are observing in Poland, because I just do not want to only complain. There are some good stuff concerning what is happening, that Poland seems to be today the leader of religious declining right now. So this is a good stuff, really. And Polish women became really anti-church. We have organized a lot of protests in front of some church and in front of church, let's say. Also, the more and more people talk about abuses, including the pedophilia. So this becoming the more and more loud in Poland. And despite the religious, indoctrination in schools, religion is only valid for 16% or even less right now for young people. So this is the other, part of what the Polish government and church are doing, that really people starting to see that yeah, it's something, that becoming just, less religious and far away from the church. So yeah, I hope that this trend will be still, on the line.
Yeah, and I hope that also maybe the Polish church at some point will change its understanding of what Christianity is about. I was raised very Catholic, and I always learned in church that, you know, Jesus was actually preaching love and not hatred towards everybody who is different. So maybe this will also reach some of the archbishops in Poland and other places. Maybe you already alert Magda a little bit to the situation of the progressive side of the society, civil society, a lot of people who are mobilized right now in feminist causes, also against the anti-democratic measures. And maybe to round up the second round, Maciej, you would like to comment on what we can do as and I'm not only speaking about me as an MEP, but also just citizens in other European countries to support these political movements, to support civil society in Poland. Does it have an impact to work across borders? You are the international secretary of the Polish Greens. You are working a lot with people from other European countries. Does it make sense? Does that create a positive response? And what would you wish for also from other organizations, associations, but also political parties across the European Union?
Yeah, okay, so you have been already doing much, both you personally or also the Greens throughout Europe and other progressive and democratic political factions across Europe. So now you have already helped much, and we thank you for the support, as it gives boosts up morale, gives the feeling of connectedness and feeling that we are all now part of this big, huge democratic European society. So we are obviously very thankful for that. But having said that, in my opinion, the only way for success in making this government more civilized and more accountable, or even replacing it with another government in the future, the only way of success can be achieved only internally. It is ourselves in Poland that need to get to work and need to make the Polish government adhering to the rule of law and democratic standards again. So the international aspect is clearly helpful, but it cannot replace the job that we need to do at home in Poland. Now, coming back to what can be done to help Poland adhere to the rule of law at the international level, I am not 100% in agreement with Joanna as the sanctions as an effective mechanism. In my opinion, they cannot be the only mechanism. The Polish government, in their official messaging, already presents the EU as an alien, hostile organization, which is an agent of influence for Germany, which is an eternal enemy of Poland, and which is once more trying to conquer and to subjugate Poland. So if the response for the EU is only to punish Poland, to punish the Polish government, it will only further fuel those anti-European sentiments, and it will further worsen the situation. So in addition to sanctions, now which can help, but which can be only one tool among many, another thing that the EU should do is to redouble on the pro-European marketing, public promotion, propaganda. Well, we must not forget that the Polish-EU relations are not relations only between the European institutions and the nasty government which does not obey to the European law. So those are also relations regarding hundreds of thousands of Polish people now who work abroad, now who prosper, who flourish now because of the of the EU funding, there are 38 million people that are European citizens, and if the Polish government responses with the anti-EU propaganda, that the EU should do the same. Now it should launch numerous pro-European, pro-rule of law campaigns in Poland, only on a bigger scale. We should not. So now we should not think about it as a wasted money. Now we should use as many funds as necessary. And the other thing is this projected COVID-19 relief fund, the so-called Marshall Plan for Europe for the 21st century. This also can be a huge opportunity for Poland. There are already voices saying that Poland should not take part in that because the government does not adhere to the rule of law. In my opinion, those are bad voices. Now Poland should take part of it. Poland should receive those funds. Only those funds should be redirected in such a way that they could circumvent the government to the largest extent possible, and instead they should be directed directly to the local governments, which are to a huge extent independent from the law and justice, and it should be redirected also to the Polish NGOs, because we have a huge economic crisis coming. The government having a really huge and active social policies and programs in the past few years, which drained the budget, making the government ill prepared to meet these economic consequences. So the government won't likely have enough money to stop the crisis from happening. So on the one hand, when we have the government that cannot cope with the crisis, on the other hand, we have local governments and NGOs who are helped by the large influx of EU money, which allows them to survive. Then the people will make an easy choice. They will support those who have money.
I hope we also have good arguments, like, for example, defending rule of law and fundamental rights. But thank you, Maciej. And maybe I'll just very briefly, because we only have 5 minutes left, follow up on the question on cooperation with other international institutions, because indeed some of them have been mentioned already. The OSCE, who has taken an opinion about the elections that are upcoming on the 10th of May. But also we are very closely cooperating with the Council of Europe that has been mentioned, and they are namely with the Venice Commission, which is an independent commission. It's not run by any kind of political party, or it's not adherent to any kind of political color, and they have given very, very harsh resonance to the recent justice reform in Poland, but also some other measures that PiS has pushed for. Then obviously the Commissioner for Human Rights, Dunia Mijatović, also they're working very closely on the situation in Poland. She has also positioned herself, and I would maybe like to follow up a little bit on the suggestions that have been made with regards to what the European Commission can still do. I think it's a good sign that they have started the infringement procedure, but indeed, I think Joanna was already pointing at the important thing: how long will it take until we see results coming from this infringement procedure? And indeed, that can take very, very long. So we also need to follow other path in order to do something about the situation, and one of them, and that has been outlined by Maciej, the situation with how we can use funding conditionalizing funding on functioning rule of law and fundamental rights. And that doesn't mean suspending funds in case there are breaches of rule of law, but redirecting it to local and regional actors who could then manage these funds. That is a very concrete proposal that we have for the next MFF, so for the next budget of the European Union, that is being negotiated now and supposed to be finalized in autumn. And I think that would be a very important leveraging tool in order to push for having reforms like this stopped and not followed up on. But obviously, and that's also very important, to have a side, an encouraging side, and to have direct European funding, for example, for civil society organizations, for LGBTI organizations, for feminist organizations, for organizations in general that are standing up for human rights and the rule of law. Also, that is something that we want to include in the next budget. I think it will be more and more important over the next 7 years, not only in Poland, but in many other member states as well. And obviously, what we also need again and again is to have this awareness being raised, is to speak about the issues that are happening, because as has been said, this might be a problem that can only be solved in Poland, but at the same time, Polish citizens are EU citizens, and so it also concerns all of us that they can enjoy their fundamental rights and a democratic system with rule of law and a free judiciary. And having said that, I would like to thank our 3 wonderful speakers once again. It was a very, very interesting insight in the situation in Poland. As you could see, it's not always very easy to follow the situation, but I think it's really worth it to see what is happening in one of the biggest member states of the European Union. And I can only say that I will follow up, stay in contact with all of you. If there are additional questions, please feel free to contact my office, and then we can forward them to the speakers. Also, again, the recording will be made available to you, and we will have further webinars and also further inform you about how things are going to develop. And as has been said, next week there is already going to be an interesting struggle how the presidential elections will go ahead on the 10th of May. So thanks a lot. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Stay healthy, most importantly. And I hope to speak to all of you soon, and then also see you in person as soon as possible again.
Thank you once again.
Bye, everyone, and thanks for the attention. Thanks.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye. Ciao.
Bye-bye. Ciao.